Good morning, I'm David Siegel. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Glide, one of the amazing no-code tools that have gathered here today. We let anyone build powerful, beautifully designed applications based on data. For example, Airtable bases, Google Sheets, Excel, etc. So it's a beautiful morning in Marin County, California. That's where I came from yesterday. And you are the sheriff of Marin County. You are Sheriff Fred Marziano. And you're doing your normal morning routine of checking on the agenda at the office. You're doing a light patrol on the beautiful rolling hills over the ocean. When you get an emergency bulletin on your radio. Sheriff, there's a huge storm coming in 2 days. And it's going to be a doozy. It's going to rain a lot. It's going to flood the roads. There's going to be a lot of problems. This is it's a bigger storm than we're used to, and we really need to put our heads together to make sure our citizens are safe. So, I want you right now, pretend you're the sheriff, and think of what is the one thing that you're going to do to help people stay safe in this storm. Can you think of it? Okay, on three. On three, okay, run. That's one example. You might not get reelected. So on three, everyone is going to shout out the thing that you're going to do as sheriff. 1, 2, 3. Make an app. I didn't hear anyone say that. That's a weird idea. But in this case, it's true. The sheriff of Marin County, California, when faced with an unprecedented storm, in 48 hours, built a Glide app and gave it to 40,000 citizens. And the app had all the up-to-date information about the storm, including the road closures, emergency help, where they could get supplies. And this is a very unusual move for a sheriff. And this is not the business case for no code, but I wanted to share this example because in 48 hours, someone with a problem, with no technical skill, made a new piece of software and distributed it to 40,000 people. The 40,000 people part is incredible, but the interesting thing, I think, is not a technical person, novel problem that you usually don't think of, having software as a solution, created software to solve the problem. And I think this is the exciting promise of no code. It changes our mindset about what software is, who it's for, and what kind of problems it can solve. It shows that it's a general tool for humans to solve problems of any kind. I don't know why I'm in the dock here, but hopefully that doesn't interfere. Okay, so now I want to give a couple customer examples, business examples using Glide, just to set context for how people use our tool in particular, and to give us all examples to think about as we reason here over the next 2 days about the business potential of no code. So Sarin is they're a manufacturer of LED lighting equipment in the Midwestern United States, and they built a Glide app for inventory and field sales. And I have a video but no audio, so I'm going to tell you what they're saying. They say, Glide is amazing, you should all use it. No. So they had this big spreadsheet of all of their inventory, and it was inaccessible, and people would call each other and read off the spreadsheet over the phone. So they built the Glide app. Oh, I'm hearing a little bit of audio from the back. Anyway, and they built this app for their employees, and they were all able to see in real time and share with their customers and their distributors this information that's normally locked in a spreadsheet. And if you could hear the audio, you would hear the delight in their voices and how proud they are of having created a custom piece of software. And the thing that they emphasize in the video is let them focus more on their customer interactions and the problem at hand rather than tracking the inventory and coordinating. Here's another interesting example. So the PGA, this is a professional golf association, and they actually they ran the Ryder Cup and many of their other tournaments using Glide apps for many different functions. They started with an app for their attendees to tell them what color shirt to wear each day, where to show up, and have them report issues on the golf course. But they ended up building a tracking app to help run their first international golf tournament coming out of COVID. This was actually an EU versus US tournament, and I attended it. This is in Wisconsin. And you'll see in a moment, they used to have this paper-based system when people would come and go from the stands to write down your ticket number if you wanted to go get a beer or use the restroom. And non-technical people who worked at the PGA built a Glide app that could track how full the stand was, and they could scan people's tickets and report issues. So they went from paper to fully digital in 1 year. And no developers worked on this. So it was a huge, huge leap forward for them. And one other interesting aspect is because they went digital, they have this data set of check-ins and check-outs from the stands, and they could see the capacity. So they put that into their business intelligence tools and have a lot more insights for the upcoming tournaments about capacities and how to reallocate the stands. So what do all these have in common? I'm going to explain what these cases have in common to help us put a lens on no-code. It's so broad. No-code could be used for anything, for starting a new business, for launching a new product idea, or doing something as small as replacing a spreadsheet in a business. But in these cases, you had a real urgent problem for a business or organization. It wasn't a hypothetical new venture. These are not entrepreneurs. These are people within organizations with an urgent problem they want to solve quickly. And this is one of my favorite facets of no-code, is that in each of these cases, the problem was solved by the people who are closest to it. So the sheriff is the one who knows what the citizens are going to need during a storm, and he made the software. The people who run the warehouse know about the inventory. They created the software for managing it. And the people who run the tournament and take the tickets and did it in years past built the app to replace that process. And if you compare this to traditional software development, you create a spec with all the requirements, and then you ship that document to a team who they don't know the business as much. What they do know, they're experts in software development. And they implement the requirements, and then you have to check. And there's always a bit of a mismatch. This is something really special about no-code, is the people who are most intimately familiar, the real experts, also can create the solution. So we call this category of software that Glide creates apps for work. And this metaphor that we like to refer to is of an iceberg, where the ice above the water is public software. This is App Store apps, public websites, and then the substantial part of the iceberg underneath the water, as we all know, that's the private software for businesses, the spreadsheets, et cetera. And that's our focus at Glide. And I think it's as no-code becomes more mature, I think we're all understanding this shift in focus from the highly visible public-facing software, which is very risky and often doesn't address immediate problems, to this more mature understanding of the bulk of software in the world, which is for business. And a couple number slides. If you compare consumer spending on software to enterprise spending, there's almost no comparison. Businesses spend a lot of money on software compared to individuals. And, oh, I'm sorry, I saw some of you taking pictures if you'd like to. We'll share these slides later. And custom software it's not just expensive, it's very hard stuff to make, software. These are pretty generous numbers. 6 months to create a custom software project. If you're in a company and you say we're going to create custom software in 6 months, you're going to get like an immediate promotion. That is remarkably fast. $50,000, again, that's a steal if you can create custom software for 50 grand. Usually it's 6 figures and up. When we were doing the research phase for Glide, we regularly talked to people who said, we had 18 months and $250,000 budgeted to create the project. It went to 24 months. We doubled the budget. It failed. That was the kind of story we heard really often. And then changing needs. You know, your business is changing all the time, and usually when you develop a piece of software, it's kind of stuck in stone at that moment. It's very hard to improve going forward. Another one of my favorite anecdotes from the early research phase of Glide, we were interviewing people about mobile software development at their companies, and we talked to an IT team that said, you know, we spent 18 months on this internal application for our employees, and we finally launched it. We were really excited, and then the day after we launched it to our employees, Touch ID came out on the iPhone. And they said, can we use Touch ID instead of the password that you guys built into the software? And they said, I'm sorry, we didn't budget any time for new feature development. And so the employees weren't able to use this new feature for the foreseeable future in that software. A more sort of qualitative anecdote about this. This is the CEO of Stripe. He's known for his very interesting insights. And I'm just going to read this. One of the strange facts about the world is how hard it is for organizations to build good software. They can reliably turn capital into a nice headquarters, a great fleet of cars, or a nice advertising campaign. But for whatever reason, they can't turn capital into good software. So for the remainder of my talk, I want to talk about the challenge of creating good software. Even if you're a company with hundreds of skilled developers who can code and you have a lot of money to spend on the problem, software development is still hard. We don't live in a world where if you know how to code, you're creating great software all the time. And if you don't know how to code, that's foreclosed to you. Everyone finds software extremely difficult and expensive to create. And a lot of our insights that I want to talk about at Glide come from thinking about why is software still hard for the people with the know-how and the money? If we can fix those problems, that's where we start to expand it for everyone. So that's obvious. Software expensive and hard to build. And what's not obvious is most software that should exist doesn't yet. And we started to see this when we compared an estimate of the number of software developers in the world to another estimate of how many spreadsheet users there are. And this comparison here just shows you people really desire to create software, even in sort of the limited form of a spreadsheet. And we think of spreadsheet as one of the original no-code tools, or maybe low-code because of the formula language. But spreadsheets are a hugely powerful programming environment, hugely successful, with very broad reach. So back to this metaphor, we have the public software above the waterline, and then below you have the software for companies. And I think this is something that we're all excited about in no-code, is the vast ocean of software that people would create if they could. And most software we think is just not created yet. So that's our mission at Glide, is to create 1 billion new software developers. And the way we think about it, we started thinking about, what is still challenging for the companies that the CEO of Stripe mentioned? What is fundamentally hard about creating software, even if you know how to code and have money? And we picked out these 4 themes: design, time, logic, and data. So for the rest of my talk, I'm going to talk about how these themes, these ingredients of software development, inform Glide's perspective on no-code. And maybe you can borrow these when you're working on your own no-code tool or when you're pitching no-code to customers about how it improves software development fundamentally. Because we think great software is so much more than code. And if we just remove the code from the equation, there's still so much that's difficult about creating software. So we're going to talk about these themes and how we improve these aspects. So in Glide, we start with your data, whether it's in a Google Sheet, Excel file, Airtable, and we're just adding BigQuery right now for larger scale. But what we noticed was, just like those 2.6 billion spreadsheet users, people inside of companies trying to create software, they already have some data. They have it in a spreadsheet, but they're trying to improve a process, and they're limited by the capabilities of their spreadsheet tool. For example, spreadsheets don't have a user interface that's separate from the spreadsheet itself. Spreadsheets are powerful because they combine the application and the development environment and the database all in the same interface. So you can move really quickly. That's a great thing about spreadsheets. But because the application interface and the development environment and the database are all the same, you can't distribute a spreadsheet to 10,000 people. They can break it immediately. And just to show you, if you're unfamiliar with Glide, when you're building software in Glide, you have this data interface where you see, in this case, all the information from your spreadsheet, and then you add calculated columns to it that do transformations and calculations on your data. And it doesn't use formulas. I'll get to that in a bit. But here you can see we have, in the first column, these are the SKUs for our inventory. And immediately in the second column, we generate a barcode for each of those. That's just one of our column types, a barcode generator. And it just takes as input the SKU number, generates a barcode. We have a relation to other items. This green column is a roll-up, so this is summing an order total. And then this representation with little pictures, these are relations. If you use Airtable, it's sort of like links. This is relating to other information in the database. So you build up this calculated view of your data, and then you bind it to an interface. So you think about the data first, and then you think about the interface. The second theme that we wanted to simplify was logic. So we have 2.6 billion spreadsheet users in the world, but most spreadsheet users use their spreadsheet just as a simple table. They're not writing complex formulas. So when we put the logic into Glide, we thought really carefully about how we were going to represent it. And we decided to have no syntax whatsoever in Glide. So there's no formula language. Instead, you create these high-level calculated columns that do transformations on the data. This is an example of one. So this is an if-then-else column that calculates an emoji and a label based on the number of units leased in an apartment management app. And you can see the result is that all of these apartments are vacant, which is represented with a negative emoji, I guess, because the people using this app don't want their apartments to be vacant. And here's just a quick example of Glide in dark mode. So this is where you can add the columns to your spreadsheet, and you can see all of the different manners of calculated columns that create logic on top of the data. I'll play it one more time. It's kind of quick. So these columns with the green icons, these are all calculated columns that create the logic on top of the data layer. And then finally, regarding logic, we have an action editor that can have conditional behaviors on top of your data. So if a user presses a button, whether or not they're an admin or whether or not the inventory is above 0, it might have conditional behavior to update the information. Now, one of the more esoteric themes that we think about for improving software development fundamentally is time. And this isn't time to create. This is what happens to software over time. So most software gets worse over time. As soon as you create a piece of software and the clock starts, it becomes less secure. And it also becomes uglier, because the world changes underneath that piece of software. And if you are using a great piece of software created by competent, attentive people, you will get security updates to that software, and you might get performance updates. So in practice, the best software that we all use every day gets these kind of updates. But a lot of times when you're building software inside of a business, you don't have this budget to improve it, and it just goes stale. If you've ever used internal software at your business, especially at a large company, it looks like it's over 10 years old because it was created a long time ago and it never improved. The icons are blurry. We all have these high-density screens now, but the assets created for it might be bitmaps from when screens had a lower resolution, for example, and it doesn't have the modern design trends. So this is an example. This is the world's coolest app 10 years ago. This is the pinnacle of app design. This is Instagram in 2012. And if the design never improved here, you might consider this software broken today because it's not competitive, it's not interesting, it wouldn't hold the user's attention. And it didn't change, the world changed. And design trends changed our eyes and how we evaluate this. And design is hugely important in software today. If your software is ugly and clunky, even your employees they'll stop reporting their vacations. They'll stop interacting with the software. It won't hold their attention. So this is an important aspect to Glide's approach to no code. This is sort of the no design aspect. So as I mentioned, the world's best software gets security and performance updates over time, but Glide apps get design updates because the design system is very high level and managed. So this is an example of a Glide app created in 2019. It's an employee directory. The person who created this app never worked on it again after 2019. But we shipped design updates to their software because the Glide system controls design at a very high level. So in 2021, Android and the world kind of moved from these on the left you can see this text entry has this very subtle underline, and the underline has an accent color to show that it's focused. A lot of human interface guidelines moved away from this because it wasn't very accessible. They moved to text entries that have a full outline around them. And you can see that the switcher used to be very saturated in the background color and it's become more subtle. These are just automatic changes. If you build your app on Glide, you just get these changes automatically. You'll wake up and the software that you're using inside your company or for your customers has improved its design because we ship those design improvements to your software. And another thing I'll preview a little bit today is our next generation design system coming in the spring is going to improve apps and make them even more contemporary. So that's one of the businesses, the values I think that we can bring to businesses is this promise of, if you use a no-code tool that's at a higher level of abstraction, your app is less worn by time. It can improve automatically, and in the case of Glide, your business software will look just as contemporary 10 years from now as it does today. So the final theme, the final lens through which we consider software development at Glide is design. So design it can be a very contentious and hot button topic, because you have these sort of iconoclastic people like Steve Jobs who make these very bold statements about design. People like to argue about design, so they look very sophisticated. And the classic argument is design is not how it looks, it's how it works. Design is very important. Good design is good business. This is the president of IBM from back in the day, Thomas Watson Jr. So people care a lot about design. But beyond how design looks or works, you have all this overflow of considerations when you're designing software. Typography, color, shapes and symbols, responsiveness, how applications change on different device screen sizes, gestures, transitions, cues for different platforms and OSs. Another one that I loved is perceived performance. So you can do all sorts of sleight of hand in an application to make it feel faster than it actually is. The software that you use that you would say is like the fast software on my computer, it uses fast technology, but it also uses animations and lots of subtle tricks to seem faster. That's an important aspect of design. Here's an example of how no-code helps with design in a very subtle way. So a lot of apps today support a light and a dark theme that automatically changes at sunset and sunrise with your device settings. And so how do you implement a dark theme in your software? Maybe you want to have a dark theme for your customers. They might ask for this. They might say, hey, this app that the company's created, it sort of stands out on my screen at nighttime when everything else goes into dark mode. Your app is still really bright. You might want to bring this to your software. So implementing a dark mode for your software is much more than just substituting white with black, and vice versa. So this is an example of just the dark and light color system in Glide. You can see that there's almost 30 different shades of gray involved in making these light and dark themes. And you can't see with the light in the room and this projector, but if you just look at the cursor over this menu item on this menu, there's like 6 different shades of gray to create a hover effect on a menu that has a shadow over another dark piece of user interface, which are delineated by other dark lines between the list items. And this is an extremely complex color science that if you don't know how to code, you probably also don't know how to reason about this. And you wouldn't want to have to reinvent this for every piece of software you're going to create. But your employees and your customers will expect that your software behaves in this way, because this is just becoming a standard to go from light to dark mode at night. So this is a part of the no design system within Glide. Any software you create on Glide is automatically going to have this figured out. You don't have to think about it even once. So you create a piece of software for your business. You might design it during the day and not even know about this capability. But your employees and customers, the sun goes down, their device goes into night mode, and the software will transition into a dark theme. So all of this reasoning informs one of our perspectives at Glide, is that design is harder than code. So especially for the domain of software that we're creating for business use, the code is not at all the differentiating factor, but the design has an opportunity to do that. So it's very important, I think, when we're selling no code and we're thinking about its position, to bring in design as one of the elements that it helps with. It's not just a technology problem. Design is a human interpretation problem and a problem of delighting the user. So how can we think about making design easier? One of our inspirations at Glide is the Apple Watch. And the Apple Watch is an example of a design system. And a design system is a small set of choices, and each choice independently is very easy to make. And for example, in the Apple Watch, what case material do you want, and what strap do you want, and what color should the strap be, and what watch face, and what complications, and what accent color. When you in a very real sense, you design your own Apple Watch when you buy one from Apple, but you don't start with a sketch pad and the raw materials. You start with a design system that's been created for you that has constraints. And you make 10 different decisions, which results in trillions of different unique combinations of the watch. So you can have a sporty pride watch, or you can have something kind of dressed up. And that is the approach that we're trying to take with software design inside of Glide. So for example, on the right-hand side, this is the design system in Glide expressed as the preferences when you're designing your software. So in Glide, you don't arrange anything on a pixel boundary. You don't decide the rounding radius of a button or a hexadecimal value of a color. You tell us, what accent color do you want? Do you want the corners in your software to be rounded or square? Do you want more room or less room in the application? Do you want the navigation to be on the left and minimal, or on the top and quite clear? And then this creates a set of constraints where the environment sort of automatically designs itself. And these are all the decisions you don't have to make. So this set of UI elements that you can see here, this is the navigation. This is just the navigation of the Glide application. And as you change the parameters in the design system, you get a different look and feel. And another aspect of this navigation system is Glide will figure out for you, if you're on a mobile device or you're on a large screen, the best way for your users to navigate. And it's not something you have to decide. This is another example of the kind of really difficult design thinking that if you're building an app for a business, you don't want to have to do every single time you make another business app. You just want the contemporary great choices that your employees and customers would expect. Or maybe you're creating an app for a mountain biking company and you want it to be a little more sporty. So what's coming next for Glide? In the spring, we're doing the 2023 edition of the Glide design system. So here's a preview of that. So if you know nothing about design whatsoever, this is the kind of software result that you can create in Glide. It's very high design, very contemporary, and mostly automated except for very high-level decisions, as I showed before. And you can see here, the latest iPhone has this new dynamic island feature, which subtly changes the geometry at the top of the screen. This is something that we're going to figure out how to handle at Glide. So the software that you made last year is just going to be corrected for that. It's not something you have to think about. When you're building software yourself, you are always having to respond to these type of changes. And if it's the inventory app for your company's warehouse, and some of your employees have a new iPhone with this facet, it's never going to be worth the time to go back to that software and accommodate that. But with Nocode, we can be more flexible at responding to changes in the environment like this. And we're also working on, in addition to modernizing our design system, we're working on a new responsive design engine that works across large and small screens. So if you're familiar with Glide today, you have Glide apps and Glide pages. Apps are for mobile, pages are for web and desktop. We're going to unify the design system so you don't have to make that choice anymore, so that your applications will automatically adapt to whatever device they're on to display in the best possible way. So for example here, this is a applicant tracking system. This is how we track all of the people who apply or are interviewing for jobs at Glide. We just create one of these ourselves. And you can see on desktop, where there's plenty of space, you get large navigation across the top with icons, and on mobile it's collapsed into a menu automatically. Here's a customer portal example. So maybe on desktop or on laptops within the company, you're using the large interface, and then on the go, you automatically get mobile navigation and lots of subtle changes in the component system to present that application appropriately on mobile. And again, this is something you don't ever have to think about in Glide. We have a lot of customers who they design a mobile app and they don't even know that there's a large format. And then if their customer opens it on a PC, they get the PC interface. It's all automatic. There's a business report. Another thing we're adding, back to the theme of data, is we're adding BigQuery support, and the issue of no-code scalability came up in the last panel conversation. BigQuery will let Glide scale to millions of rows. So this is just an example. We're all making progress on these limits of no-code. And I think it's an incredible part of no-code is that no-code gets us to the conversation about the technical limits immediately. We don't talk about, do we have the budget, can we create it? It just all of the non-technical limits are removed or ameliorated, and immediately we get to talking about the technical problem. And technical limits are a lot easier to raise than those other types of cultural limits. The inventory tracker, this is another very popular use case of Glide. So yeah, that's the Highlight Glide 3. It's the next version of Glide that is going to make progress on all of these themes of data, logic, design, and time coming in the spring. And that's our view on no code and how we're improving software development.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If anyone has any question.
I think I can just shout it out.
Yeah.
Probably hear me.
I'll repeat it.
Yeah. It was super interesting. Thank you very much. I think that design system is very cool. I do have a question about scalability, and especially if you're using sort of Google Sheets or Airtable in the back end, and you're creating these calculated columns
That's right.
for data interface.
Yeah.
If a value changes anywhere, do you have to recalculate all the computed fields, and does that create constraints for the scalability?
Great question. Yes. So we have some brilliant engineers at Glide, more brilliant than the average engineer that any of our customers could hire. And the way Glide's so just to take a step back, that's what a no-code company is, and that's the opportunity we have. Hire the smartest person on security you can, and then encode their knowledge about world-class software security into your no-code platform, and then your customers just get that benefit without even realizing it. So we think about that as we get the best designers, we can hire the best security people. So we have, for example, pen testing at Glide, where we hire hackers to hack Glide. And then if they find problems, we fix them. And our customers are sleeping when this happens. They don't know about it, and their software just got more secure. So in the case of computation, Glide does what's called lazy computation. So it only computes what you're seeing. So when a value changes, we don't traverse the entire graph of all of your data. We just compute what the user needs to see on the screen. And again, an example of this is this is getting very technical, but it's fun to talk about. We have a new back-end computation model which moves all of the data loading and computation to much higher performance servers. And that's where all of the data updating and calculation happens. And those servers just produce a description of what needs to be shown on the screen. So this is for our enterprise customers right now who want to scale to 1 million rows, for example. We can move that heavy lifting, which is still optimized to only calculate what's needed to see the current screen, and then it materializes on the screen. And it wasn't always that way. It used to be slower. And this is something that we implicitly make progress on as far as the customer is concerned. And then you just wake up and your app is faster because we've shipped a better computation model.
Thanks.
Cool. Another one? An easier one? No?
Yeah.
Maybe I can share it out too. Maybe not another easier one, but thank you again for the presentation. It was very interesting. And I have a topic that I don't know if Glide work around it. It's about collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's about collaboration. How did Glide allow your users to work at the same time on an application?
Right.
Yes?
No.
No. Okay.
We don't. No. We would love to. It's a hard problem we're not focused on yet. I think it would make Glide better. But we're all inspired by Figma, making design tools collaborative. So far, we don't think that software is collaborative in the same way that visual design is, for example. So we think that the pressure to make it collaborative is not as great. But we do have this annoying thing that if you try to open a Glide project that someone else is editing, you see someone's editing it. Yes. We don't even tell you who. It could be a lot better. But yeah, we're not there yet. But what you can do is someone can work on the data. And many of our customers will create multiple apps that refer to the same data source. So you might be working on separate apps at the same time. They're all together in one workflow. So someone might be working on the internal dashboard and someone else on the client application as separate projects. And then maybe even someone else is working on the Airtable base if that's where the data is stored. So there are these points where you can collaborate, but specifically, working on the same screen and the same app at the same time, we don't allow that yet. just a technical limit.
So just be maybe another thing. Is it easy in Glide to like merge some parts of application into one application?
No, that's also not easy. You can copy paste but this is something our customers ask for a lot because we have maybe 400 templates, and they say, I want the inventory tracking from the inventory tracker, and then I want the employee directory screens from here. We do have a little bit of infrastructure for that in your project. When you create a new screen, we have these template screens, and we're going to be able to sort of slurp those in from all of our templates in our store soon, but it's not something that's easy right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Someone else? Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really cool.
Thank you.
I have a question. Will you, in the future, let us use REST API as data sources in Glide?
Great question.
If I want to put my Xano database in Glide?
So our BigQuery data source is built on, I didn't think I was going to get into all these technical details that I love to talk about, but our BigQuery data source is built on our new queryable architecture. The original data loading architecture for Glide was a cloning, mirroring architecture. So we synchronize your Google Sheet, your Airtable base, or your Excel file into a database that Glide can access. And it all is loaded on the device. So you get a powerful computation model where you can do all these calculated columns and rollups, et cetera, but you can only address about 25,000 rows on the device. Our queryable architecture makes a trade-off of less computational power, so you can't do roll-ups, for example, to sum or find the average price of 1 million orders, but it does scale practically indefinitely. So on this new queryable architecture, over the next year, you'll see more SQL-like data sources, like data warehouses like Snowflake, with million-row support, and we're also going to be able to build REST support on top of this, so you'll be able to have arbitrary data loading. It's really cool because when you use the queryable data sources in Glide, you'll pick a high-scale SQL database, for example, and you don't write any SQL. You just use the Nocode tools, the filtering, the designs that's already in Glide today, and under the hood, this will all get translated into efficient queries. And we're just going to build the same interface for REST, but probably not until the beginning of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Really good to know.
It's a great talk, by the way. I had a question about data. Once you get it into Glide, is it possible to timestamp fields and create historical data? Like when you do inventory tracking, do you have to build it in your data source, the history fields, or can you also, once you have the data coming into Glide, can you build timestamped inventory data?
Yeah, Glide has timestamping. It has an action system where, when users press a button or even view a field, you can write the current time into the record, for example.
Okay, yeah. And the value of the fields as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's not sort of a sophisticated record versioning mechanism where you might want to clone the entire record and create versions of it. You could build that, but it's not first class.
All right, we have time for one more. Yeah, make it count.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I work at Theodo, and we are an agency, so we recommend some tools for projects. And my biggest fear is to recommend a tool and meet some limitation or blocking during the development.
Yes.
And say to the client, okay, I can't do that, so I'm sorry. You always talk about a great use case. What are the classic non-use case? And when you don't recommend using Glide or things that Glide can do?
Yeah. So Emmanuel mentioned this, something about limits. Oh, when people sort of graduate from the no-code tool and then they like, okay, now we've proven that this is a real use case or will benefit our business, now we're going to go code it. We all hate to hear that. I talk about this phenomenon of escape velocity. And in the very first days of Glide, when Glide only created read-only apps for the first maybe 4 months. You couldn't add a record, you couldn't change anything. It was kind of a toy. We called it brochure apps. And we saw people prototype, and then move to a better tool. And as we removed limits and increased the power of the tool, that escape velocity sort of increased. So they would present a prototype at their company, and the IT team would, we hear this all the time, by the way. A non-technical person in a company builds a Glide app, and then they bring it to their IT team, and they say, we want to build this. And the IT team says, we actually don't know how to build an app with this design, because we don't know mobile and we don't have designers. We don't know how to create. It will not look this good. That's one thing they say immediately. And two, they say your prototype actually satisfies all the requirements. Why are we going to rebuild this? So that's that escape velocity moment. But you asked about what use cases should you not use Glide for? We are not designing Glide for high-scale public consumer apps. And this is what we see a lot from the maker community, like, I'm going to build the next Airbnb or Twitter. That is not a good business, because those apps, the failure rate is 99.9%. There's going to be either zero or one new Airbnbs in the next year, so that's not a customer. And the data scalability issue is not something where we're mostly designing Glide for use by businesses, both internally and externally. So it can be for your customers, for example, or just your employees. But yeah, I would say high-scale consumer apps. If you have a desire to go to the App Store, we don't deal with the App Store at all, because our business customers never ask for it. They are all concerned with owning their own distribution. Oh, I'll add one more just because to compare to the other no-code tools here. If you want a lot of design control, if you have a very particular customer about how their logo and the colors, Glide is not the platform for you. It's one of the trade-offs we make. We give you less upfront design control, although we have CSS support on our higher tiers. Just to help you go quickly and to not think about those details. And sometimes you can talk your customer out of that. You can say, look, do you really want this custom font that no other software uses, or can we just move 100 times faster and use like the standard font that's going to be more legible and that your users will expect? There's other no-code tools that if you need to have a totally unique design, I would recommend using those instead.
Thank you.
Hi.
Okay.